My stepmom and dad called me ungrateful for refusing to give my house to their pregnant daughter after they abandoned me as a kid. The look in his eyes wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness either. It was something colder, indifference. As I stood in the middle of my own living room, watching him sip beer like he hadn't just suggested I hand over my house to the daughter he raised while I rotted in a dorm, I realized something terrifying. This man had never once considered me his son. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all began, when I was just 8 years old and my world quietly split in two. I used to think I was just a difficult kid. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I wasn't manly enough. Maybe I asked too many questions, or maybe I just didn't know how to make my dad proud. It's funny how when you're little, you assume the problem must be you. That something in you is broken, because why else would your own dad look through you like you're invisible? That illusion finally cracked the year my mom died. She was my whole world. My mom wasn't flashy, and she didn't raise her voice, but she had this calm kind of strength, the kind that made me feel like even when the world spun out of control, she'd keep things grounded. Until one day, she didn't come home. I waited for her at school for 2 hours before someone finally told me what had happened. A drunk driver at an intersection. She'd been 10 minutes late. That 10 minutes cost her everything. And when I saw my dad walk into the principal's office that day with another woman trailing behind him, I knew, even at 8 years old, that something was very wrong. That woman was Marissa. Bleached blonde, perfume that stung my eyes, and fake nails that looked like they belonged on some kind of cartoon villain. The moment she saw me, she tilted her head, narrowed her eyes, and gave me this tight, forced smile that said it all. You're not part of the plan. And I wasn't. 2 months after my mom's funeral, they were married. Just like that. And 2 months after the wedding, I was dropped off at a cold stone building surrounded by tall hedges and older boys who didn't even look at me. Boarding school. No explanation. My dad didn't even help carry my bag inside. Marissa made it clear from the start. She hadn't signed up to raise someone else's baggage. Those were her exact words. I overheard her say them once when she thought I was asleep on the couch. She called me the leftover, the ghost of that dead woman. And my dad? He said nothing. Ashlyn was born the following year. While I was away being molded by strict teachers and empty weekends, Ashlyn was living the dream back home. Birthday parties, dance recitals, family vacations I only found out about through offhand comments when I came home for Christmas break. Not that I came home often. Most years, I stayed at school during the holidays. It was easier, less awkward than standing around in a house that didn't feel like mine. Even as a kid, I noticed the way my dad lit up when Ashlyn walked into the room. His eyes sparkled. He became someone else, warm, present, affectionate. Everything I wished I could see in him when I walked in. But I never did. At best, I was a polite guest. At worst, I was a mistake he tried to forget. Years passed like that. The kind of years that age you on the inside. By the time I was 15, I'd stopped hoping for anything more. No hugs. No birthday cards. No, how was school today? I realized I couldn't count on anyone, so I started counting on myself. I got my first part-time job cleaning dishes at a local diner near the boarding school. The staff was rough around the edges, but they treated me better than my own father did. From there, I worked every spare minute I could. Dishwashing turned into bussing tables, which turned into line cooking. I got good at saying yes, chef, and keeping my head down. But every cent I made went into a secret envelope tucked into my bag. My escape fund. I never told anyone about it. It felt like my only real secret. Something that was just mine. When I was 18, I left that boarding school with no fanfare. I worked full-time and studied part-time. I slept in a truck camper behind the restaurant I worked at. I kept pushing. I knew what I wanted. Freedom. Stability. A life that nobody could take away from me. Fast forward to now, at 34 years old, I'd finally done it. I'd bought my first house. A real house. 2 bedrooms, a backyard, a porch I could sit on in the evenings with a beer in hand. And maybe, just maybe, I let myself feel proud. I should have known that pride doesn't sit well with people who only see you as a backup plan. On my housewarming day, I invited a few close friends and colleagues. But my father and Marissa found out about it, so they came too. I expected awkward silences. Maybe passive-aggressive comments about the furniture or my job. What I didn't expect was what actually came out of my dad's mouth as he stood on my new porch, looking over the backyard like he already owned the place. You know, this is too much space for a single guy, he said casually, swirling the beer in his hand. Marissa, perched on one of my patio chairs, nodded with her usual scowl. Exactly. Ashlyn's pregnant. She needs a place like this. I blinked. Thought they were joking. They weren't. And that was only the beginning. They came back just 3 days after the housewarming. No call, no text. Just showed up at my door like they owned the place. And I made the mistake of answering it. There was no casual greeting this time. No forced pleasantries. My father walked in like it was still his house, and I was just borrowing it temporarily. Marissa trailed behind him, dragging Ashlyn in like a prized show pony. And Ashlyn, she had that smug, self-satisfied look like the queen had arrived to claim her throne. I just stood there frozen, watching the door swing closed behind them. They didn't even sit down. They took their seats like they were hosting me in my own damn living room. The tone was different this time. There wasn't even the pretense of suggestion anymore. My father simply declared that Ashlyn was moving in. Not could she, not we'd like to talk about. No. She would be moving in, and it would be happening immediately. He explained it like I was the one being difficult. Like I'd forgotten my role in this family, silent, obedient, replaceable. Marissa backed him up, going on about how I didn't need all this space, how a single man with no wife and no kids had no business owning a 2-bedroom house. She called it selfish. Said I was hoarding space while my sister was in crisis. And Ashlyn just stood there, soaking it in. She looked around the living room, eyeing the furniture, running her fingers along the kitchen island like she was already redecorating it in her mind. She didn't ask permission. She just announced that she'd be taking the bigger bedroom because she needed room for the baby crib. And maybe a vanity. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I told them no. I told them she wasn't moving in. That this was my house, bought with my money, and that none of them had any claim to it. Ashlyn didn't take it well. She instantly flipped the switch. Gone was the smug queen. In her place was the wounded victim. She said I was being sexist, that I was trying to punish her for being a single mom, that I was insecure and threatened by a woman making her own way. Marissa jumped in to defend her, saying that I had always been jealous, always bitter. She accused me of never truly accepting Ashlyn as my sister and called me emotionally stunted. And then, my father delivered the death blow. He said I was a mistake. Not a disappointment. Not a letdown. A mistake. Something they put up with for too long. A phase. A detour in his life that was finally being corrected. It didn't even sound like an insult the way he said it. Just cold, casual truth. Like he was finally relieved to stop pretending. That was the final straw. I stood up, looked each one of them in the eye, and told them they had 60 seconds to get the hell out of my house. That was the moment the air changed. Marissa let out this shocked little gasp, like I just cursed in church. Ashlyn looked like she couldn't decide whether to cry or scream. And my father? He laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that filled the room like a slap. He told me I was being dramatic, that I was just acting out because I'd never really been able to handle family responsibility. He said I was selfish, always had been. I told them I remembered everything. Every birthday they forgot. Every holiday they sent me a gift card while Ashlyn got a new phone or a weekend getaway. I reminded them that while I was sleeping in a camper and working double shifts, Ashlyn was getting her rent paid for, her car fixed, and her bail money covered when her little side hustles got her into trouble. I reminded them that I built this house brick by brick on my back. And I told them, loud enough for the neighbors to probably hear, that not a single one of them had the right to breathe in my living room, let alone take it from me. Ashlyn started crying, called me cruel. Marissa accused me of disrespecting the people who raised me. She said I was ungrateful, that I owed them, that everything I had was only possible because they gave me structure. That's when I pointed straight at the door and told them if they weren't gone in the next 30 seconds, I'd call the police. And I meant it. My father didn't believe me. He got in my face too close and told me to calm down, that I was making a fool of myself, that this tantrum would only prove I didn't deserve any of it. I didn't flinch. I reached for my phone, dialed 9, and hovered my thumb over the last digit. That's when he finally got it. He stepped back, spat some insult under his breath, and motioned for Marissa and Ashlyn to follow. Marissa was still yelling as they left, saying that I'd regret this, that I'd be alone forever. Ashlyn made a big show of sobbing, and right before she crossed the threshold, she said I was condemning her baby to a life of hardship. I told her that maybe her baby would grow up learning how to take responsibility, since clearly no one else in this family had figured it out. They left, not in silence, not peacefully, but in chaos. And I stood there, alone in the mess of their outrage, finally breathing like I hadn't in years. I had kicked my entire family out of my house. And for the first time in my life, I felt like it actually belonged to me. The silence after they left was suffocating. Not peaceful, not satisfying. It was the kind of silence that sits on your chest like a weight, reminding you that even though you won, whatever the hell that means, there's still something festering underneath. You can't spend your life waiting to be loved by people who only see you when they need something. I knew that. And yet, part of me still stood there in the wreckage, hoping maybe someone would knock on the door, not to take, but to say sorry. That knock never came. What had come, though, was a text from Ashlyn the next morning. One long block of passive-aggressive prose, written like she was submitting it to a parenting blog. She went on about how I'd humiliated her, how I'd robbed a child of stability, how I was the selfish one for hoarding a house when she was trying to create a family. There was no apology, no recognition of how absurd their demands had been. Just guilt, weaponized and neatly packaged in lowercase letters and dramatic ellipses. I didn't respond. For a while, that was the end of it. The text stopped. My door stayed shut. I went back to work, tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But if you've dealt with people like this before, you already know they don't stop. Not when you say no. Not even when you scream it. They just change tactics. It started with the subtle stuff. A neighbor mentioned seeing my dad's car drive slowly past my house a few times. Then, a week later, someone left a baby toy on my porch, some plastic giraffe still in its packaging, no note. Then came a card in the mailbox with Ashlyn's handwriting. She didn't sign it, just scribbled some manipulative garbage about a home being where the heart is. That's when I finally snapped. I didn't yell this time, didn't throw things. I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshots I'd been saving for months, the messages Ashlyn sent to my friend, the link to her adult content page, the overly flirtatious DMs, the awkward attempt at networking that turned into a proposition. See, my friend had gone out for drinks once with a group where Ashlyn happened to be. She followed him afterward, said she remembered his face from the party, and then later messaged him asking if he was interested in some extra fun. He didn't even respond. Just sent the whole thread to me with an apology, not realizing she was my sister. I'd kept that stuff. Not because I wanted dirt on her, but because deep down, I knew she'd pull something like this eventually. And now here we were. So I sent it. I sent the screenshots directly to my father. No message. No warning. Just the raw truth in digital form. A little window into what his pride and joy had been up to behind the facade of family values and self-righteous tantrums. I expected backlash. What I didn't expect was how fast it came. Marissa called me 2 hours later, venom dripping from every syllable. She left a voicemail I didn't pick up. Said I was disgusting for digging into Ashlyn's private life, that I'd violated her dignity, that I was weaponizing her past to shame her like some sort of sadist. She even tried to spin it like I was the predator for keeping those screenshots. I blocked her number, but the calls didn't stop. My father left a voicemail next, his voice slower, colder. No yelling, just disappointment. He said I had crossed a line and that I should have come to him if I had concerns. That he didn't believe all of it, but even if it was true, I had no right to share it. He made it sound like I had humiliated him, like I had betrayed the family. Betrayed the family. Funny how I was never part of it until they needed a bank account with legs. I didn't respond to him either. And for a while, that felt like the end. Until it wasn't. About a week after that, I got home from work and noticed something was off. My mailbox was open. The lock on the side gate was clipped. At first, I thought maybe a neighbor had left it open or a package thief. But then I got closer. The garage door was spray-painted with 2 words, Trader Pig. I stood frozen. I didn't even go inside at first. I just stared at it. Once I did walk in, my stomach dropped. My living room was trashed. Furniture overturned. Cushions slashed. The coffee table shattered. The hallway mirror in pieces on the floor. My bedroom, the mattress sliced open like someone had taken a knife to it in a frenzy. That house had been my everything. My sanctuary. My symbol that I had made it on my own. And now it looked like a war zone. I rushed to the security panel and pulled up the camera feeds. There it was, grainy black and white footage, timestamped just hours earlier. 2 people, hooded, one shorter, one taller, creeping through the side gate with a bat. The taller one walked like my father. The shorter one had Marissa's unmistakable claw-like nails, even beneath the hoodie. I'd seen them too many times to not recognize those hands. They didn't even try to hide. They smashed, kicked, tore through the home like it had insulted them. Like I had. I copied the footage, emailed it to myself, and called the police. Filing the statement was easier than I expected. The officer didn't question a thing, just watched the footage, nodded grimly, and started filling out the report for criminal trespassing and property destruction. They added potential charges for harassment and vandalism too. I requested a restraining order, not just against my father, but Marissa as well. And Ashlyn, for good measure. It's in process now. The officer said it might take a few weeks, but with that kind of evidence, it was likely to be granted. I felt numb when I drove away from the station, like all the adrenaline had drained from my body at once. It wasn't cathartic. It wasn't victorious. It was just hollow. But for the first time in my life, I was done. Done hoping they'd change. Done letting them twist guilt into loyalty. Done being the family scapegoat. I stood up. I fought back. I protected what was mine. They may have broken my mirror, but they didn't break me. I always thought cutting ties with my family would happen quietly. Maybe just a slow drift, a few missed calls, eventually no contact. I never imagined it would end in a courtroom with my father and Marissa caught on tape, smashing their way through my home like it meant nothing. But that's exactly how it ended. After filing the police report, the officers took it seriously. Between the surveillance footage, the physical damage, and their history of harassing me, the case moved fast. They were arrested, formally charged, and soon after, a court date was set. In exchange for avoiding jail time, they were sentenced to 1 year of probation, 100 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management classes. The judge also ordered restitution, which meant they had to pay for all the damage they caused, down to the last broken lamp. The judge also approved my restraining order request, barring them from contacting me or coming anywhere near my home or job. Ashlyn was included too, though she wasn't charged. I made sure she'd never be able to insert herself back into my life. That part, the legal closure, was cleaner than I expected. It was everything else that took longer to process. The house took weeks to fix. The mess they made wasn't just physical, it was personal. They didn't just damage my furniture, they vandalized the one thing I had built entirely on my own. But piece by piece, I put it back together. I painted over the words they'd spray painted on my garage. I replaced the mirror in the hallway. I even kept the broken coffee table as a reminder, not of the attack, but of how far I'd come. There was a moment, standing in my cleaned-up living room, where it all finally settled. They were gone. For good. Sometimes I still get texts from numbers I don't recognize. Maybe friends of theirs. Maybe people hoping I'll eventually soften or forgive. But I won't. Not because I'm bitter. Not because I want revenge. But because enough is finally enough. My entire life, I was the afterthought. The burden. The mistake. I grew up believing I had to earn love by giving everything I had, even to people who gave me nothing back. I don't believe that anymore. I gave them more chances than they ever deserved. And when they couldn't take from me anymore, they tried to destroy me. That's not family. That's a warning label. I didn't just survive them. I ended the cycle.